11 kilograms of solid gold sealed inside the most intact royal burial ever found in Egypt. For decades, the story seems simple. A young king struck down in his prime, murdered by a blow to the skull. But when scientists finally extracted ancient DNA from 11 royal mummies, they did not find evidence of assassination. They uncovered something far worse, a family secret, written not in any weapon, but in Tutankhamun's own genes. In November 1922, a weathered British archaeologist named Howard Carter pressed his lantern to the darkness and peered through a chiseled hole in a sealed doorway. What he saw would stun the world. A royal tomb untouched for over 3,000 years, its treasures piled high in dazzling disorder. At the heart of this chaos, Carter uncovered a burial mask unlike anything seen before. 11 kilograms of hammered gold inlaid with lapis and quartz, staring back with serene, ancient eyes. The press called it the find of the century. Harry Burton's photographs, shot on fragile glass plates, captured Carter and Lord Carnarvon standing shoulder to shoulder beside the mask, their faces lit by the reflected glow of a lost world. But behind the spectacle, a shadow crept in. Early headlines whispered of a curse, but the real fixation was murder. British tabloids and American dailies ran with rumors that Tutankhamun had been struck down by palace rivals. Some pointed to Ai, the elderly vizier who took the throne days after the burial. Others named Horemheb, the ambitious general who erased Tutankhamun's memory from stone. Theories multiplied. A fatal blow to the head, poison in the wine, a dagger in the dark. In the absence of answers, suspicion took root and flourished, casting the boy king's golden mask as both a trophy and a clue in an unsolved royal crime. In February 2010, a team led by Zahi Hawass published a genetic study in the Journal of the American Medical Association that would turn the story of Tutankhamun on its head. 11 royal mummies, including Tutankhamun, were sampled under strict cleanroom conditions. Each specimen, bones and teeth, was catalogued and logged from Amenhotep III to the mysterious younger lady of Kafev 35. The team's methods read like a forensic checklist: double-sealed tubes, UV-sterilized benches, negative controls, and independent replication in 2 separate labs. The genetic profiles revealed a family tree more tangled than any legend. The data identified the mummy from KV-55 as Akhenaten, Tutankhamun's father, and the younger lady as his mother. But the shock came from the kinship coefficients. Both parents were not just related, but full siblings. The numbers were unambiguous. A kinship coefficient of 0.25, the genetic signature of offspring born to brother and sister. The 11 mummies mapped out a closed circle: Akhenaten, the younger lady, Tutankhamun, and a handful of other royals, all bound by blood and burial. The DNA readings swept aside decades of murder theories and palace intrigue, replacing them with the cold certainty of inherited risk. The boy in the golden mask was not a victim of courtly violence, but of a dynasty's obsession with its own blood. Royal Egypt was engineered to keep power in the family, but the method was as dangerous as it was deliberate. Priestly advisors and court officials shaped a system where the king's blood was seen as the vessel of divinity itself. To protect that divine essence, the pharaohs married sisters, daughters, and nieces, following the mythic example of Osiris and Isis. The logic was simple: the purer the blood, the stronger the claim to the throne. But genetics tells a different story. When full siblings have a child, there is a 25% chance, F equals 0.25, that any given gene will be inherited in 2 identical copies from the same ancestor. This number is not just a statistic, it is a warning. Imagine 2 identical socks in a drawer. If you pull out one, then the other, there is a 1 in 4 chance you have picked the same pair. Now picture a deck of cards. Drawing the same card from 2 identical decks at random mirrors, that same 25% risk. In the royal nursery, that risk was not theoretical. The Egyptian elite believed they were forging a dynasty of gods. Instead, they built an inbreeding machine, one that quietly loaded every new heir with the genetic burden of the last. Tutankhamun's body tells a story that no golden mask can hide. High-resolution CT scans, conducted between 2005 and 2009, revealed a skeleton twisted by disease. His left foot was bent inward at a 30-degree angle, a classic club foot, talipes equinovarus, making it impossible to walk without a pronounced limp. The navicular bone in that same foot had collapsed. A textbook case of Kohler disease, where bone tissue dies from lack of blood supply. The spine showed signs of scoliosis, with a curve that forced his torso off-center. Even the roof of his mouth was split by a midline cleft, a defect that would have made eating and speaking difficult. Archaeologists cataloged over 130 walking canes in his tomb, ebony, ivory, gold-inlaid wood, many with worn tips and reinforced shafts. These weren't props for a kingly image. Microscopic wear patterns proved they were battered by daily use. The boy king leaned on them to move through his palace, not to strike a pose for eternity. Metagenomic sequencing of his bones uncovered another threat: DNA from 3 species of malaria parasite, Plasmodium falciparum vivax, and malaria. The presence of all 3 points to repeated infections, not a single bout. For most people, malaria is survivable, but Tutankhamun's immune system was weakened, his bones riddled with signs of chronic sinusitis and anemia. Every infection was a risk he could not afford. The genetic gamble of full sibling marriage had consequences that played out in flesh and bone. Instead of a robust ruler, Egypt produced a teenager whose every step was a struggle, whose pain was constant, and whose greatest enemy was the bloodline that crowned him king. 2 coffins, each barely the length of a forearm, lay hidden in a side chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb. Carter's excavation notes describe them as gilded, their surfaces polished to a mirror shine, yet their contents were heartbreakingly small. 2 mummified infants, each wrapped in linen, their faces forever turned away from the living. For decades, these tiny bodies were a footnote, evidence perhaps of a king's lost children or a queen's private grief. But DNA analysis would recast their story as the dynasty's final act. Low-coverage sequencing, performed under rigorous contamination controls, revealed that both infants shared the same mitochondrial haplogroup as Tutankhamun. Their nuclear DNA showed a kinship coefficient of nearly 0.25, confirming the girls were his daughters, conceived with Ankhesenamun, his half-sister. The genetic circle had closed in on itself. CT scans told a second, quieter tragedy. The larger infant showed a split in the lower spine, spina bifida, and a severe, unnatural curve. Scoliosis arched the tiny vertebrae into a crescent. The smaller was underdeveloped, her bones fragile, her limbs stilled before birth. Both had inherited the full weight of their family's genetic burden. No golden mask or royal epithet could protect them. The dynasty's obsession with purity had produced not heirs, but casualties. Their short lives and early deaths signaled a genetic dead end, a silent warning sealed in gold and linen. For Ankhesenamun, the loss was more than personal. It was the collapse of a royal future. With no surviving children, the bloodline that once claimed divine favor was extinguished, leaving only grief and the echo of a mother's hope. By the late 1960s, the image of Tutankhamun as a murdered boy king gripped the public imagination. But the evidence that fueled those theories could not withstand the scrutiny of modern forensic science. Radiologists revisited the skull fractures, first flagged in the Manchester X-ray, this time using high-resolution computed tomography slices that mapped every crack and fissure in 3 dimensions. The pattern of the cranial break told its own story. A clean, linear fracture with no sign of surrounding hemorrhage, no swelling, and no bone fragments pressed inward. In living bone, a fatal blow leaves unmistakable traces. Blood pools in the tissues, marrow leaks into the crack, and the edges of the break turn jagged and dark. Tutankhamun's fracture showed none of these hallmarks. Instead, microfracture analysis pointed to post-mortem damage, likely caused by the pressure of the coffin lid or the rough handling during the 1925 autopsy. Embalming resin still pooled around the wound had seeped into the break after death, not before. The verdict from the computed tomography team was unanimous. There was no evidence of a lethal injury inflicted during life. The so-called murder wound was a product of time, not treachery. With the cold logic of radiology, the case for assassination collapsed, closing the door on decades of intrigue and leaving only the harsh reality of a body undone from within. A single clay tablet unearthed in the ruins of Hattusa captures the last gasp of a dying dynasty. The message is simple and raw. A queen of Egypt, Ankhesenamun, begs the Hittite king to send his son to become her husband. She wrote that her husband was dead, that she had no son, and that she was unwilling to marry any of her own people. The plea was unprecedented. No Egyptian royal widow had ever asked a foreigner to claim the throne. The Hittite prince Zananza set out for Egypt, but he never arrived. Hittite records state that the prince was murdered on Egyptian soil, his death shrouded in silence. The implication is clear. Someone within Egypt's court, perhaps I, the aged vizier, or Horemheb, the ruthless general, ordered the killing to prevent foreign blood from entering the royal line. With the foreign alliance destroyed, Ankhesenamun was forced to marry Ai, a man old enough to be her grandfather. Reliefs from Thebes show Ai wearing the royal crown with Ankhesenamun beside him, but her name vanishes from the record soon after. When Horemheb seized power, he launched a campaign of erasure. Stone carvers were sent into the temples to chisel away the cartouches of Tutankhamun and Akhenaten. Their names were struck from king lists and their images hacked from the walls. The dynasty that once claimed divine favor was wiped from history, leaving only broken statues and defaced reliefs. The golden mask survives, but the family it crowned is gone, extinguished by its own blood and buried by those who followed. Today, DNA doesn't just rewrite legends. It exposes the human cost of power pursued at any price. Tutankhamun's suffering remains a stark warning. When bloodlines become boundaries, the consequences echo for generations. Science strips away myth, but it can't erase the tragedy written in bone. What do you think?